Welcome back to Equity Mates. It is time for...
Hit my portfolio. Hit my portfolio.
That's right. This segment is all about an expert reviewing the portfolios of one of our community members. And today we have Renee joining us. Renee, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No, thank you for submitting. We're excited for this one. And our expert in the studio today is financial advisor from North Haven, Matt. Matt, how are you going?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Alrighty, well, as always, Ren, do you want to take us through Renee's portfolio?
Yeah, so Renee's portfolio is primarily 7 ETFs or indexed funds. So we've got Vanguard Ethical Conscious International Shares. We've got Beta Shares Global Sustainability Leaders. And then we've got Vanguard International Shares as well. VDHG. Coming back to Australia, we've got Vanguard Australian Shares, and then we've got some infrastructure, Vanguard Global Infrastructure as well. So those are the ETFs, and then there's one stock, Lithium Energy.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Matt, where do you want to start? Well, actually, sorry, we usually start with a nickname. So what have we got today?
So I've called this portfolio Sustainably Boring.
Oh, wow.
Right,
Okay.
And I'll explain. Don't take that the wrong way.
Don't take that the wrong way. Renee, how do you respond?
Yeah, no, I think I'm definitely well and truly due for a kick up the bum with this one.
Well, I don't think boring is a negative term when it comes to
no,
investing.
no.
But maybe tell us a little bit about how you came to put this portfolio together.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess a few years ago, I sort of thought investing would be a good idea, having absolutely zero exposure growing up. So that's when I started sort of DCAing into the international shares one. And then a few years later, we thought the ethically conscious was a good idea. So we dumped a heap of money into that. As you can see, I have attachment issues and I'm too bloody scared to sell anything because I know every time I look at it that there's so much crossover. So yeah, I'm basically like, I know I need to do something. I just don't know what.
And I guess, are you still actively putting money into any of these at the moment, or are you waiting now just to, I guess...
We are, yeah. So the Vanguard International Shares Index Fund is the one that I never stopped putting money into. So
Nice.
We've gone through a bit of a life change cycle the last few years. And then, yeah, so basically I'm DCAing 1,400 a fortnight, 1,000 into the VDHG and then 400 into the International Shares Fund. We recently sold our house and we kind of don't intend on buying property anytime soon. So I'm kind of in a position where I've got a fair bit more that I want to put in. I just, don't really know what to do.
Sounds like you should actually get some proper professional advice from
Yeah,
Matt.
It's on the list. So yeah, I mean, it was all fun and games until I had my daughter 2 years ago, and then everything just sort of got a bit hard. I fell out of touch with life and the world. Yeah, I just kind of kept putting into those two, and then still trying to figure out what to sell, what to keep, and what to put more into.
Well, Matt, knowing all of that now, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so look, to backtrack on that name, I fully agree with Ren that, boring is good. If you're not someone who's watching the market closely, boring is better. So obviously a fairly high allocation to these sustainable ETFs. That's the big thing that jumps out here. These ESG ETFs really had a
moment.
They had a moment a few years ago. Yeah, so that's all become a bit more politicized, and there's been concerns around greenwashing or what's actually required to be an ESG company. I mean, WiseTech has shown up in a few ESG ETFs over time, and we can't say their governance has been squeaky clean with everything that's come to light recently. So I mean,
the big shock for me was looking at the International Shares Index Fund and then the, in quotations, ethically and socially responsible, like the top 5 holdings are just the same.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's what I was going to say actually is that Vanguard one, when you look at, say, the top 10, you're just buying the S&P 500 basically. That ETHI, your Beta Shares one, that has some other more interesting names in there. So some of the top holdings, it's not just the Mag 7, you've got things like Visa, Toyota, ASML, MasterCard, some more interesting ones. So if you're keen on that ESG and you want to keep adding to one of them, then I would go with ETHI. But as you've said, you're allocating mostly to VGS and the like.
What do you think about that as a dollar cost averaging strategy, Matt? Allocating to those two in particular?
To the sustainable ones?
No, to VGS and VDHG.
Yeah, look, VGS is about 80% US, VDHG is about 30 to 40% US, and VDHG also gives you some fixed interest, and I think there's a bit of property infrastructure in there, so it is more diversified. Honestly, I would just probably do VDHG. I wouldn't maybe worry too much about doing both unless you really wanted more US exposure. If 30 to 40% wasn't enough for you in VDHG, then adding a bit to VGS. It's constructed that way for a reason. It's a pretty sensible allocation. But like I said, it's got a few other things in it as well, VDHG, that rounds out your portfolio a bit more. So I would probably focus on that. Something that I did really like about your portfolio, which you hardly ever see, is you had some infrastructure exposure there. You know, most people just focus on Australian stocks, US stocks, but international stuff. To see some infrastructure was really good.
Is that something that I should consider putting more into? Because I guess that was sort of a quick question I had. It's like, if I put a little bit into something and then, you know, I haven't really prioritized putting more into it, is it even worth having it there? Or is it better just to simplify it and, you know, just get rid of it and then focus on the big ones like the VDHG and, you know, potentially this FE one?
Yeah, if you're really focusing on VDHG, I would just focus mostly on VDHG because it is that one-stop shop. The thing about the Vanguard Global Infrastructure Fund, VBLD, it's really heavy on electricity and pipelines, so it's done really well in the last year or so. But you probably wouldn't just have that as your infrastructure exposure. You'd want to round that out. Things like telecoms, toll roads, airports, rounding that out. And there's other ETFs that can do that. VanEck have some, Magellan have some. So if you are going to round out, you do that. But look, you mentioned that you're not looking at getting back into property soon. If you're really looking at putting some money into this portfolio in a short period of time and not just dollar cost averaging into VDHG, then I definitely support the guys in that getting an advisor to do a really well-rounded, properly constructed portfolio that has allocation to all those bits and pieces would make sense. That's not a plug. Speak to anyone you think can help. But I would definitely not just dump it all into one holding and call it good.
It's definitely on the top of the list. Our house only sold sort of a few months ago, so I've just got the money in a savings account at the moment while we kind of figure out what we want to do with it. And the other quick question I had was, do you think it's like not necessarily concerning, but it's problematic to have sort of everything in Vanguard? Because I'm much sort of like a simple person where I'm like, well, it's just easier to manage when it's all there. But is that, you know, concerning in any way? Should we be having it in, you know, with some other providers or things like that?
Look, if Vanguard goes down, we're all going down. I think like the proper answer to that would be, I mean, you've got a bit in beta shares there as well. So, you know, there is a little bit across there. But, yeah, Vanguard is just ginormous. I think you're pretty safe to keep it there. But, yeah, all these other providers, Global X, all these other ETF providers have very similar products and you could easily diversify.
Same underlying thing at the end of the day. So,
exactly. Yeah.
And Vanguard have what, $7 trillion under management or something. So
yeah,
I don't think there's an issue there.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I noticed with Vanguard, and this might be sort of a silly question, but you know, they'll run like a high growth index fund, for example, and then, you know, that's the not listed version, and then the high growth ETF is the listed version. But when I look at them sort of from a basic level, it looks like they basically both do the same thing. Like, are you meant to pick one or the other, or are they a similar product except one's listed and one's not?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of this unlisted stuff, and it's definitely not as pretty to look at. Like, I looked at it, I was like, what is VAN0111AU? And I was like, oh, it's VDHG. Like, it's just the unlisted version. So it doesn't make too much of a difference. There's underlying differences in terms of the tax structure and how Vanguard are actually structuring it, but what you get is more or less the same.
I think to be really clear, like if you go on the Vanguard website for VDHG as an example, there's actually a toggle where you can choose the ETF or the managed fund. And so like the underlying investments are the same, but to Matt's point, there might be some structural
looking at VDHG specifically, the management fee is different. So ETF is 0.27, the managed fee is 0.29. So slight differences. Underlying assets, I imagine, would be very similar, if not exactly the same. But yeah, slight differences. So worth having a look at.
Yeah. Look, large institutions and financial advisors like us will often buy unlisted versions. But that's because, it's easy for us to get exposure to those. As an everyday retail investor, the listed equivalents are super easy. You can just get on your brokerage app, just buy it, and you've got it the minute you click buy, basically. So it doesn't really matter to sum it up, but there's not too much difference.
Nice.
Well, Renee, did you have any more questions for Matt?
The only other just sort of quick one I had was, do you think the two things I think I may be missing out on a little bit is maybe more of like a small cap type, focusing a bit more. I feel like it's all very heavily weighted into like the companies that form the top of the charts and the top of the indexes and stuff, more small companies, and also any sort of like all world ex US and Australia type stuff. I feel like I've got US and Australia, but that's probably it.
Yeah. So you've got almost 60% of the portfolio in the US when you look through the ETFs, about 20% in Australia, and then about 16% in other countries. So definitely a heavy skew towards the US. It really depends what approach you're going to take. If you're really just going to focus on VDHG, then you're getting a lot of that diversification through there. But if you did want to be more specific, then looking at an ex-US ETF would probably make sense. And but basically keeping three buckets. You could have your Australian shares, US shares, and ex-US, which has a little bit of Australia, but like a couple of percent. So it basically gives you all the key themes: the international, the US, and Australia. But VDHG does that for you, so it's really up to your preference.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I think I might have to grab your details offline if I can.
It'd be a pleasure. Yeah.
You've just reminded me that I really need to just actually do something and make a decision.
It'd be a pleasure to chat more.
Well, we can put you in touch, Renee, but I think a massive thank you for sharing the portfolio with us today and asking your questions in such a public setting. Hopefully it's helped, and hopefully Matt or another advisor can help you more after this as well.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Nice one. Thank you so much, Renee. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.
Equity.